understand tonight and explore what it means to stop interfering with the flow of life. If you could see, even in a small way, how your thoughts and responses and emotions are nothing but a bundle of leaping interferences with your life, with your day. If you could understand what is involved in this, you could put far more intelligence into the task of ceasing to interfere. The first thing to understand, and you listen very carefully, and don't you ever forget it. The first thing to understand is that you never really interfere with yourself. There's no way you can really interfere with your actual nature. No way. What we can do is to be so mixed up, so neurotic, so impulsive, so childish, as that we can set up a standard of behavior for both ourselves and for the exterior world, and demand that this person that we call I and the other person in relationship to it, that is the exterior world, that everything should conform to what I have called myself. The minute we sense that an event or a person or even one of our own thoughts is not affirming what we have falsely called ourselves, with great terror and nervousness and hostility and contempt and the rest of it, we leap in to interfere to try to save, quote marks, me. This is better known as hell. Haven't you ever looked at yourself closely enough to ask yourself, who is this person who's always interfering, and who's this person who's trying to change something inside? Haven't you ever asked yourself simply what is going on inside of you? What interferes? Generally speaking, what interferes with us living naturally, happily, if you want to use that word, normally, wholly? What interferes? As generalizations, we can say that our package of habits interfere. You can call it our picked up, acquired ideas interfere. Always leaping in, always leaping in to save who? You don't even know who you are, and yet you spend your entire day in desperation trying to save yourself. I'll ask you right now. I'm asking you a question now. You ask me questions, I'll ask you one. Who are you trying to save? You don't know. You have no answer to that at all. All you can do is bring out a thought or another label or a self-description or some vague me or I. What interferes largely and falsely is a sense of danger. You examine You examine your life today from this morning, and you will find out that you have, if you're looking at all, if you're not watching yourself, forget it. You will find out that you felt yourself in danger all day long, right? Two questions. Again, two questions. Who or what was endangering you? And what was being endangered? You don't know. You have no idea. If you knew, you wouldn't be in the state that you're in right now, sitting before me here. Now what we're going to cover next is quite deep. And you might want to ask questions on it afterward, but follow it. The chief interference with our naturalness, with this normality, is identified knowledge. I'll rephrase that because it's a little awkward to explain. Identification with knowledge. Now look, we have to have facts. We have to have knowledge. We have to understand these things. We're getting knowledge in this class. And I wonder if any one of you in this room in a small way understands that once you have acquired this knowledge about life, about yourself, how your mind works, about your hostility, about your anxiety, about your fixed habits to interfere with yourself and therefore with others. I wonder if you understand that knowledge must get to the point where you are so knowledgeable that you're able to drop it when necessary instead of identifying it as a person, calling yourself a person. All right, I'll ask you right now, what are you? You again don't know because you've never, as we talked last week, you've never watched your nightmares, or you so suppressed them, you'll say you don't have any. You've never watched your dreams. You've never watched the expression on your face sitting in this room. You've never watched how you're 5 different people in 5 different situations. If you could see how you shift from being one kind of a person to another, that would be a clue for you to cease to identify yourself at all. Now, what are you? You don't even know that you're calling yourself a very competent this or that. And how do you feel towards someone else when they deny this self-description you have? Let's generalize a little bit. Well, let me ask you, first of all, may I see your hands? How many of you think you're nice people? May I see your hands? You're nice people? I wonder what you mean by that. Some of you still have the image anyway without raising your hand. What do you mean by being nice? That is identification with certain fact. You heard the fact when you were a little child that you should be a nice person, which has been a strain on you ever since. For one thing, it's never reciprocated by other people. You're nice and they treat you the way they do. You're loving and they betray you. All this is identification with certain kind of knowledge. How many of you interfere with the flow of your inner life by expecting other people to behave a certain way toward you. I didn't say nice or bad. I said, how many of you expect other people to behave a certain way toward you so that you keep yourself properly and nicely and comfortably in place? I will tell you who, every single one of you in this room. Not necessarily in this room. I've said many times, you're on very good behavior in this room. And you'd better be, by the way, or you'll be told about it. When you have any negative feeling of any kind, you're interfering uselessly, pointlessly, because there's nothing there to be protected. So you feel bored. How many of you feel bored? Have you ever examined that, for example? This is because you're bored because you think that if you could just get her, just get him, just get it, you would no longer be bored. But we won't go into that. When you expect another person to behave according to the way that you want them to behave, to put it very simply, to make you feel good or to make you feel secure, you're interfering wrongly with your own happiness, and the very thing you are doing is preventing you from seeing the situation and being in complete, I said, complete command of the situation. You, what you call you, with your bundle of attitudes and ideas, are standing right in the way. I'm going to tell you a marvelous secret. Tremendous. When you go into the world, starting tomorrow, starting tonight, you be extremely observant of both yourself and of anything that happens to you out there. The phone call you got, the letter, the driver of the other car, the customer in your store, the husband, the wife, the child, the school teacher. And you find out where you have set up a very hard expectation of how they should behave toward you. They should buy your goods. They should be nice to you. And track it back to the point where you can really see, as I said at the beginning, don't you understand we're talking about your life? Track it back to where you can see where your hell exists. Now, put it to you very bluntly. It exists in your stupid, neurotic, demanding behavior, and nowhere else. That is what interference is. If you knew what it meant to die to yourself, which means to die to your ideas, your labels, your identifications, if you knew what it meant, you would behave entirely different, different toward yourself. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice to behave different toward yourself? Instead of scolding yourself all day or demanding something for this self which never comes to an end, which therefore change your relationship out there. But get back to the original point. I'm going to have to speak very frankly to you. I'm not being dramatic. I'm going to tell you something tonight. And you can take it or leave it. It's not nearly enough to be whipped around by the exterior world that you meet out there and work on it. That's good. You work out there. If you have that irritable boss or customer or wife or husband, you work on that. You're going to have to deliberately and ruthlessly, in a way you can't possibly yet imagine, go into your mind, into your emotions, and stir things up to the point where you have this scream we've talked about, where nothing is important on God's earth to you except to find out what is causing this and to put an end to it. Which means you're going to have to stop being the big phony you are, instead of thinking you're calm, to see how scared and nervous you really are. This is an astonishing thing I'm telling you, but if you want out, you will do it. So that all day long, listen, all day long you're shaken up, you're nervous, you don't know which way to turn. Now you know which way to turn, don't you? You know how to behave toward that person. Heaven help you. So that you don't know how to defend yourself anymore or promote yourself anymore. You're cut adrift. You feel like you're dying. Thank heaven. When you feel like you're being destroyed and when you really understand what this is all about, then you have something totally new in your life. I'm afraid, very much afraid, that you're not in nearly enough despair yet. You think you're in despair? Oof. You have no idea what you're going to have to go through if you want out. You think you've been humiliated? Oh, you've hardly been touched. That divorce of yours, nothing at all. Nothing. So he left you. So she left you. You haven't been touched. You think that was hell? You just wait. That's good news for you, you understand? So that all the fight, all the hostility, all the hardness, all the stubbornness, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice to hang on to that or to cease using it as an interference. Drop it, give it up, die to it. So that your hell, which you think you have now, is increased 1,000%. At this point, I will speak personally now. At this point, I can help you. Because you'll need help at this point. Now you can collect a little bit of knowledge and go out of here and live in the way you always live. From this day forward, I want you to be thoroughly scared all day long. Consciously. You have been, you understand, today, for example, and resentful, and hoping it'll all come to an end. It isn't going to come to an end at all, because it's right here. And changing that circumstance, demanding that that person conform to your idea of how he should conform. It hasn't done a thing for you except make you more neurotic, has it? You cease to interfere when you know what it means to die to your false sense of self. Put it very simply. Then there's no one to interfere, and no one there as an object of interference. And that is the end of you. And that is the life of you. So do you want to keep fighting? Or do you want to give up? I will tell you, as you know, it's very difficult to give up. We're very frightened of dying to ourselves, to our habits, to our impulses, to our beliefs, our religious beliefs, social beliefs. Every time, let me go back a little further. All day long, today, each one of you in this room have looked out at the world and inwardly at yourself, and you have asked the question, no, you've pleaded the question, please tell me who I am. And up to this point, you have not heard a satisfactory answer, a real answer. You've heard 1,000 false answers. You've been told you're a child of God, and as if you're godly at all. Do you remember what we covered last week? I'll review it in connection with this. As long as you ask the question, please tell me who I am, you can only receive deceptive, destructive answers. Because everybody will tell you, everyone out there will tell you, you're a nice, submissive son, a good mother, successful man. And your own lies will lie to you and tell you who you are. Cease to interfere by not asking the question of who you are, and see what happens then. Do you have the courage to stop asking who you are? You'll never know on the level of a question. You'll know when the question itself stops, because you have understood everything that we've talked about. I wish there were a stronger word than terror. Can you think of one? Pardon?
Panic?
Panic? You know what a panic your life is? Each one of you, I'm not accepting anyone in this room. Do you know what a panic your life is? Do you know how scared you are? Do you think you're going to change anything by continuing with this interference? Do you think you're going to change anything by continuing to be the way you have been up until now? You might as well make up your mind that nothing is going to change unless you go as deeply into this as you can and not resist lessons, not resist the truth which is trying to cure us, not to hurt us. So even the fear of death will go. Have you ever asked, what's going to happen to me after death? You have 1,000 times. What would your state be like if you didn't ask the question? Would there be anyone there to ask the question? You work from now on, finding out where all your acquired and conditioned responses are leaping in to interfere pointlessly. Nothing good can come from it. Catch yourself in that response and stop it and suffer from it in a different way, so that we don't continue to feed neurotic food to ourselves. This is what we're doing all day long, feeding ourselves neurotic food, which we've had yesterday and last week and 10 years ago and 20 years ago. Finally, this thing you fear most of all, which I will now call letting go, this thing we fear most of all, itself is a false fear. By doing it, by going ahead with it, by not screaming back when we are screamed at, but dying to the response when it arises, that is letting go. And when we've done so completely, then we see the emptiness of the fear, and then we'll say probably with a small smile to ourselves, why didn't I see that years ago? We didn't see it because not only were we afraid, but we didn't know how to handle the fear itself. Because the fear itself, listen, then we really stop. The fear itself had hoaxed us. Tonight, that's the end of fear hoaxing any of us and keeping all this sickness in place. Tonight, we're beginning to see through it. So that when we see the ghost in front of us, waving its arms and terrifying us, we stand there in fear and trembling. Don't try to not be scared, you're terrified. But we look at the ghost, whatever it might be, an evil thing we did 10 years ago, madness, whatever it might be. We stand there and shake, looking at the ghost. The ghost itself will run away from you. I'm telling you, you ran away from the ghost and it laughed, using a figure of speech. It laughed as you ran away and said, "Ha, I've got him." And it did. This time you stand there and shake and tremble, and don't you put on the wrong facial expression. Try to bluff it, because the ghost can see through you. It knows when you're bluffing. You stand there and be afraid, but don't run away. Then the ghost that is in you will die, will vanish. And that is what is known as the new birth, which the New Testament speaks about. New nature, call it what you want. Which very few human beings on this earth ever attain. But we're going to do it if you want. Nothing, heaven help us, nothing is going to stand in the way of that. And I'll tell you one final thing that is not going to stand in the way of it. My own sickness, my own evil isn't going to stand in the way of me finding this. I refuse. Your sickness, your neurosis, your hardness. Together, we're all going to aim that yours is not going to stand in the way of you finding this newness. Don't let it bluff you. Don't let your own wickedness bluff you anymore. Don't let it hoax you from this night on, and we'll break out together. As a good start, we're going to just have open discussion now. As a good start, you might ask yourself, how would I behave in every event of life if I had a clear mind? Just think about it a little bit. How would I behave toward the political situation, toward my family, toward my health, toward my finances, toward the flat tire in my car when it's raining, toward what we call religion, toward God, toward the past, toward the future? How would I think? How would I behave if I had a clear mind? Obviously, it'd be quite different behavior than we have now, would it not be? Then if this behavior was radically different, not merely a switch from one neurosis to another, if this behavior was truly different, if it was truly new, then I would get a new kind of a resulting feeling in me from this new action, would I not? Isn't that worth striving for? To work hard to find out how I can indeed. Look, we've said it before. If it confuses you, or a clear psychic system, but trash that we call excitement, you can have it. It's all yours. You can have the excitement of being cared for, of being submissive, of having another human being tell you what to do, or some God you've invented tell you what to do. You can have it. You're welcome to it. Because then you will be filled with hatred toward this person who is taking care of you, won't you? Won't you? I will tell you something else. Not 1 ounce of sickness, of neurosis, will be tolerated from you in this class. If you want to take it out there in the world, that's up to you. It won't be tolerated here, so you'll have to make up your mind whether you want to come here or not. Besides, you knew this before I told you this. You understood it, but I will make it quite clear to you right now. Now I'll add one more point. Personally now, as far as I'm concerned, this class is giving me nothing that I couldn't get elsewhere in some other experiences. You're not giving me anything here. So as far as I'm concerned, if the group was to fall apart tonight, I would walk away without looking back 1 second, not once. This is just in case there's anything in any of you that thinks that you are contributing anything to me or to the group. I would shed you of that illusion right now, so that you come here with right purposes, which is to find out. If that is clear between us, great, we'll work together. You have perhaps incidentally seen some instances of this, of people who have come once or twice and then fallen away because they didn't want to go along with the rules of truth. They're not my rules at all. Isn't that a good thing? That your neurosis will not be tolerated here? Aren't you glad? You know all those you know all those sick people who tolerate your neurosis and help destroy you? Huh? You know all those relatives and friends who tolerate it out there? Don't make the mistake of thinking that this is the same as out there. It isn't. Don't you make that mistake for 1 split second, or I will remind you of it. Like to talk about something? Yes, Rudy.
I see that somehow in my case, I sometimes cannot see the difference. You know, there seems to be a difference, a vague thought. There is a difference, you know. I can say that there is a difference between this class and the outside world. But since I pretend in here I'm supposed to act good, I know this, right? So that's why I can't see the difference. I can say I see it. But when I go out there, I vaguely can see there's a difference, you know. These people seem to act different than these people over here. Seems like those people over there are living for something entirely different than these people here.
Yes, that's quite true, quite correct. You can't bring your madness into this room. You can bring it in, but it cannot take over in any way, not for 1 second. Matter of fact, how are you going to come here? How are any of us going to come here unless we bring all these things in with us? So we do indeed have to bring them into the room. You had better get just as ruthless with yourself. Then you will be consciously ruthless with everyone you meet. Only the word ruthless will change its meaning so that it's a right thing. And a right way to put it would be no compromise. Right? Don't you dare put up 1 second longer with these things you're seeing in yourself. You get tough. Even if you get knocked down, you get into the battle. You're not in the battle as long as you're going along with your mechanical neurosis. You're not in the battle at all. You're going along with it. The battle would be to say, you know, I do have a sharp tongue, and for all these years I've called it, I'm a frank person. That's how you have lied about it. You've called yourself frank. You're not frank, you're rude. Now be ruthless with yourself in seeing that. None of us like to do it, but we're going to do it. It's terribly humiliating. It's terribly shameful, isn't it? To see what an idiot I've been all my life. But it's look at it and change it or remain an idiot. Let me ask you why you are so sad. You're all so sad. This is just another imposition upon yourselves, which you have not seen as an imposition, because this force of habit of being sad, of being depressed, of being gloomy, has been the only life you've ever known since you were a small child, and the only life that you knew your parents ever knew. Remember how sad they were at times, how they cried when the outside surface appearance broke down and they could no longer pretend, or your friends, or yourself. We are sad because we don't understand that life, your life, my life, and the events of life and the people in our life cannot and will not conform to our preconceived ideas of how they should be and how they should behave toward us, because we don't see that there is no security in our own ideas of how life should treat us. We feel lonely, we feel sad, and because this is on the level of ordinary thought, we seize on some other thought as a means of relieving the sadness, the loneliness, the depression, the gloom, the despair. We seize on another thought, which is like jumping from one leaky rowboat to the next leaky rowboat. And this has been the pattern all the time. And when the second rowboat starts to sink, we immediately look around for another one, hoping that it will be a solid one, a trustworthy one, and it never is. Very hopefully, after leaping from the 50th lifeboat to the 51st, and seeing that the second one, the next one, is just as leaky as the one we left, something will dawn on us, which is simply that there is no point whatever going on this way anymore. Now, I'm without hope. Now I'm without any idea at all of where my rescue is going to come from. Before it was okay. I could always, with a little ingenuity, find a new lifeboat of any kind, an excitement, anything. And I can still see them out there, still sitting in my leaky lifeboat, and see the other ones out there. Heaven help me. It's not going to do me any good to transfer myself to one of those, not anymore. Now, I'm in a state, listen to this, I'm in a state of total terror. Frantic, rageful. No longer having any idea, any thought of what to do next. So when you're in a condition like this, what are you going to do? You're going to do absolutely nothing. You've made your decision to reject the lifeboats out there. You half wish you hadn't, because at least it seems to suspend the tension and the anxiety. But you can't do it anymore. So what's going to happen to you? You still haven't made it yet, because you still have an idea of what is going to happen to you. And the idea you have of what's going to happen to you is that at last you're going to sink. You yourself have cut off your rescue, your next move. You no longer have any command, no control over things. All control, this phony control, by the way, which is no control at all, is absent. Now you have to make another decision, a far more difficult one than to cut off your lifeboats. And that decision is to have no thought or idea, no imagination as to what will happen to you when you cease to seek the other lifeboats, when you just sit in it and let yourself sink. If you were to let yourself sink, terrified, utterly terrified, which you are now, but you're doing something different with it. You sit there, and to carry the illustration a little bit further, and watch the water in the bottom of the boat come up, fill up the boat more and more on the inside. The water should be on the outside, but now it's on the inside, and that's not good. These moments of defeat, which I can use, can be used now. Not when I reach a major crisis. Because all day long, as I'm walking down the street or at work or wherever, I'm in a constant crisis of one kind or another. Do you understand that this is a fact of your life? Do you understand that? That just as you go through your day, that every minute you have to make a decision, perhaps, that puts you in a minor crisis of some kind. You find out more about that decision, if it's a simple one, such as whether you should wear your blue coat or black coat. There's no problem there. Can you see that you are fighting within yourself to choose the right decision in order to keep your pride in place? That is a crisis for you, and that is one you can use. You can choose to have a pride defeat in order to destroy the very thing that keeps us sad. There is something in each one of us here this morning that knows we can't win. Right? Why do we keep trying? Because the hope itself is a part of the false self process, the ego process, by which we hope to keep the illusion going that I can indeed be my own commander from my false self, to put it that way. Now cling to this in spite of everything that's said in this group, in spite of the shocks you may get, in spite of everything. It's very unfortunate when we receive good fortune from the outer world. Because of all things, this is the one we seize upon as a means of temporarily shutting aside our sadness and our pride. You meet a new girlfriend, new boyfriend, you get fortunate in your financial affairs, and already you've forgotten God. But maybe you are now in this room at the point where that doesn't have quite the strong hold on you that it used to have. I think this is quite true in many of your cases, where you've seen through the game to the point where you're not completely carried away. How many of you can still be thrilled by the phone call, by the letter, by the sex experience, by some kind of good fortune of any kind at all? Still be thrilled to the point where you forget, for heaven's sake, your major task in life, which is to break the self-trap. It's all right. It's all right. We'll forget 50 times a day and be carried away. But can we bring ourselves, listen, out of the 50 times a day that we make this blunder of getting excited and saying this is it at last, out of the 50 times, could we maybe just one out of the 50 practice instant recovery that we've discussed? You remember the discussion of instant recovery? Which simply means this: you do it 1 out of 50 a day and watch how fast you grow, how fast you understand. Instant recovery means that 1 out of the 50 times where I wandered away like the prodigal son into some imagination or some exciting thought of any kind, I suddenly caught myself being carried away. I saw right in the middle of it. I was able to break the thought, break the emotional experience, break the imagination, shatter it right for now, and understand that I was indeed gone from myself. Same thing as the prodigal son returning home. Then little by little, each time I practice this instant recovery, instead of waiting for another thrill to take over the fading thrill, instant recovery, coming back to myself, being conscious of myself, then all by itself, this sadness, this feeling of hopelessness and despair will fade out, never to return again with the same intensity that it had before. Can you now, to yourself, as you sit here, admit that you were frequently overwhelmed with despair of it all? Go ahead if you like it. Go ahead and live that way if you want to. I'm telling you here in this class that you don't have to if you really don't want to. But we can't reach this point until we're willing to do the simple major principles that we've discussed many times. One of them being a willingness to understand what it means to die to my acquired identity, to my acquired sense of self, which has all these demands, all these prides, all these tender, touchy feelings, all these going home after a meeting and saying, why didn't he say that instead of this? Or, as Joan and I discussed this morning, or instead of saying, let me start the sentence over. Sometimes we say, well, if only that man or that book would say that one magic sentence. That one magic sentence. That would help me. So I'll come to the meeting hoping that maybe he'll say that one magic sentence this time that will straighten me out. That's how gullible we are. That's how lazy we are. You don't want to work on yourself. You want someone else to do it for you. But back to the main point. Can I stop loving being sad so that I can catch my first glimpse of something that is not sad at all, that can never be sad in any condition? That doesn't even have to refuse to be sad because it's not on the level where there is refusal or acceptance. Where this temptation to react with gloom or touchiness, which I've seen many times in this group, by the way, from many of you, not just one, but many of you. Where there's a state that was wide awake when I talk to this man or this lady, when I talk to the boss at work, and the boss comes over with a bunch of papers, and then maybe in a subtly critical way tells me that I did my work wrong. There's something in me that is so wide awake that the automatic reception, the automatic falling into sadness or touchiness just can't happen anymore. Instead of me being there, there's something that is not me at all, which is capital U, understanding. Now, if you can tell me how capital U, understanding, can be sad, or how total consciousness can fall into gloom over what someone says to me, can you practice not being home to the hostile remark from someone, or what you took as a hostile remark, because you're on the same level of hostility? Have you ever accused someone of something, by the way, of being cruel to you, and you found out they didn't mean it that way at all? They had no intention of being unkind to you. That would be a good thing to see, wouldn't it? However, we're not saying that there isn't a world of unkindness out there, because there is. You and I want to walk through this world in a totally new way than we walked through it up to now, which is possible, which we're learning to do in this class and in our reading. Remember what I said yesterday? Well, this will pretty much close. If I can keep myself stirred up, which I am anyway, but stirred up so that I can see that I am, and then handle it consciously, intelligently, instead of like a machine, a robot, I can begin to achieve this state we're talking about. So that to my utter astonishment, I really see that everything we've talked about in this class is not a philosophy or a religion or simply a place to come because we have nothing better to do, but incredibly in some way or another, I found myself in a group where the truth is being presented and discussed and absorbed, so that I become this new kind of human being that I've read about in religious literature, but I used to take it as merely surface personality improvement, and I was lying all the time because I had no intention of changing myself. But that phase came to an end. And I see that all these great teachers, really great teachers, I say that great deliberately, greatness being truth itself, all these great teachers, Christ, Buddha, and others, lived in this insane world as sane, intelligent, totally different kind of human beings. Not moral teachers, which is hypocrisy, but as totally different human beings, which I could not understand because I was living as an ordinary human being in my own sickness. But I have the glimpse now. You have the glimpse now. And through all the tears and the heartache and the screaming for an answer, will you stop screaming for an answer? Will you just stop it? Because when I stop screaming for an answer, I will have it, which will not be outside of me, which will not be on the level of thought, of idea, of concept. The answer will be me. And the answer, the same answer, is this gentleman and this lady. I am my own answer when I get all the lies out and all the contradictions out and all the love of being a dramatically suffering human being out. Someday I'm going to classify each one of you. Then you won't like me for 5 minutes. How many of you feel that during these talks I'm talking to you personally? Well, let me tell you about a stage you have not arrived at yet, and this will help you. You're sitting here, each of you, in a certain stage of, let me rephrase it. You're sitting here with a certain number of protective walls of various thicknesses and heights and colors, but walls of all kind. Juan spoke of buffers one time, a wall being a buffer that prevents us from being shocked. Now, to one degree or another, you're at the stage where you have all these walls. Listen to this. This is something which prevent you from being fully terrified. This is very terrifying here. And you'll never in your life find anything that is more scary, that is more dreadful, right? It's terrible. It's awful. Horrible. You understand? But because you can't take it, because you don't want to feel your full terror, or some of you might shake to pieces right here in this room if all the walls fell at once. And so the walls break down gently, and you begin to see how scared you are. So you have something to look forward to. That is, you can look forward to seeing how terrified, how frightened you really, really are. You could find small clues on it in your daily life little nervousnesses, little apprehensions, suddenly being shocked when someone speaks to you because you were in a hypnotic daze and you weren't even aware they were standing there, perhaps going to speak to you. There's 1,000 little clues where you can see your actual state of being afraid. Now, let me say this. By the way, we're an open discussion, if you wish to discuss. Juan doesn't want to do this any more than Rod. Lillian doesn't want to do it any more than Joan. Connie than Dorothy. There's a part in us that wants... I don't know why I came to this group in the first place. I was much happier before I came here. He said, living in delusion and imagination and violence, turning to violence when the proper time comes for it. So I tell you, if I see something I don't want to do, look at the pride, look at the vanity, look at my love of being sad, because it's my personal little dramatic performance inside of me. If I can look at it and see that I don't want to drop it, I don't want to give it up, I don't even see it to begin with, I've carefully hidden that from me. I'm pretty clever in hiding things from myself. I've been doing it all my life and extending it to you. I can make you believe all sorts of things about me that aren't true because I'm a great actor and you're a great actress. Oh, dear heaven. I've got to do it. I've got to do what I don't want to do. I've got to enter that room full of people and about to catch myself going into my usual mechanical hi, how are you, or smile or sternness or whatever. Having caught myself in that, I'm going to have the courage to break it and just walk in with no protective device on my face or with my words or in my gestures or in my walk itself. Exposing myself fully to the terrible thing that's going to happen to me when you catch me without my usual role. You try this sometime. You try meeting someone, friend or stranger. Catch yourself about to go into your mechanical role, which you do every single time without knowing it, and say, I'm going to go in there completely weaponless. And watch what happens inside of you as a result of doing it. This will be the shock period, won't it? The wall has been broken down a little bit so that you go through the shock of not being who you have always been all your life. Who I have not been all my life, which, to put it bluntly, is a big phony. Artificial personality. With no aim in view except to keep the performance going. Oh boy, I'll tell you. An actor who's, I'm speaking of a regular actor on the movies or stage, an actor who's been getting a lot of money and a lot of applause, a lot of ego gratification, and a lot of flowers back in the dressing room afterward. An actor or an actress who's been doing this all his or her life isn't going to give up that professional way of living. Very difficult. There's so many rewards involved. It's exactly what we're doing in our inner dramatizations, getting what we call rewards from it and applause. Or can I catch myself about to play the usual little role? Well, little one, catch a little one. So awake, so that this is an example now, so that if Joan, during the break, calls to Juan sitting here, first of all, and other people are sitting here too, first of all, Joan is wide awake. It's necessary for her to say something to Juan. She says, Juan, may I have the book off the shelf, please? And it's a practical matter. It's easier for Juan to get it and hand it to her than for her to walk over. So that on that level, it's simply a practical thing which she should do. At the same time, while she's talking to Juan, she's wide awake, being aware that other people are listening to what she's saying. And so she catches herself about to make an ego-serving statement, that is, put it in a certain way. For example, all I can do is pull out examples. She would add please to it, so that maybe that makes her sound like a polite person. Or she would say it authoritatively. Juan, get that book. So that it sounds as if she knows what she's talking about and she's in command of the whole situation. Can she catch it before it happens and stop it? So that she could simply say, naturally, being aware that everyone is listening. You're quite aware of that. You should be. But say it without getting a false reward from it. You know, if the world lived this way, all the horrors that we see in the world would be gone, because we would not use wars for ego gratification or position, political position or military position for ego gratification. The world would be sane, but let's not talk about that. It isn't going to be that way. It's going to continue the way it is. Do any of you really think, by the way, I interrupt myself, any of you really think the world is going to get better if we can just have a new peace conference or a world food conference? No, it'll just get worse as a result of these things, won't it? Because tricky men are trying to appear untricky. Heaven save us from the people who are going to save us. Okay, I've discussed for 15 minutes more. Would you like to discuss?
Talk to us about self-remembering.
All right. We can break it down in several ways. Let's start with what we call self-observation. Just looking at myself. This is what Joan was doing. At the same time she was engaged in a verbal action, maybe gesturing to Juan, would you get that book up there? She was observing herself doing that at the same instant, was she not? Self-observation, the object of that is very simple. So simple and so valuable. What? To become acquainted with myself. That's all. Not to change anything. You won't change anything by observing yourself. What am I like? But I can catch something. I can catch, you get your own examples, but for example, maybe Joan was nervous over it because something was up. Maybe she felt that Juan would object to her interrupting and talking to a pretty girl sitting next to him or something like that. There's 1,000 things that could be involved in it. So self-observation, I don't want to break down into classifying it self-observation, self-remembering, and things like that. I get too confused. Besides, it will go into certain set systems which you have read, which I do not want to follow. You start with that. And then, if you catch yourself about to make the false move as a result of honest self-observation, can you die to it? Can you practice instant recovery right then? Joan is so watchful. She sees that she's about to use a certain surface false attitude because she knows she wouldn't do it if she was just alone with one, but she knows other people are listening, maybe a person who criticized her a minute ago. So she's going to try to appear confident so as to con that other person into thinking she's confident. She has caught it. She was about to speak in a confident manner. She dropped it. She practiced instant recovery, and she dropped one little mechanical falsehood, did she not? Which brings her one step closer to her essence. Catching the falsity of loving our sadness, of loving our fear. I've asked you many times, what are you afraid of? Why do you live in that state of fear? Why? I don't know why. Why? You tell me. Why? It's because you, for one thing, just one thing, you attribute fear to the outside situation, that person, or that event. And there's no fear in it at all. It is in you. It is not easy for any of us to admit that we're living from this artificial person who's been controlling our lives, because our pride is involved in it. We've identified with this person. Try to see what you call yourself and then die to that. What are you calling yourself? Have you ever looked at it? What are you labeling yourself? How about this one? How about labeling yourself a victim of society? In one sense, we are all being victims of each other, but I'm not talking about that. You haven't made it financially. You don't have a home and a wife or husband. So you're a victim. The other person is luckier than you. Where are you calling yourself an unfortunate victim? You are violent. All victims are violent. Don't hang around people who feel sorry for themselves. Well, there goes all your friends.
I'm worse myself.
How about worry over your health? Proper concern on the physical level with your health is quite another thing from worrying over it. Why do you worry over your health? Does it connect with the fear of death itself? Huh? We talked about death yesterday. You should forget your physical body entirely until the point comes where something is necessary. And then you go to the doctor, you take a pill or ointment or whatever, take care of it. A person can be very neurotic in health matters. And the waste of the energy that's going into that. How many of you are afraid of not having control of yourself? That there's mad, wild, reckless parts in you that just take you over and drag you here and make you do things you don't want to do. Are you afraid of that? Have you ever looked at that particular kind of fear? You may flare up at the boss when you shouldn't, and you're out in the street. You flare up at your wife or husband, and you know that she can sue you or he can leave you, and so you suppress all this want to flare up. How's that for grammar? All this desire to flare up. How many of you would like to flare up more if you could get away with it? I said if you could get away with it. You can't, because you'll get knocked down. Why don't you get rid of the desire to flare up?